In a dramatic turn, Trump slashes his Ukraine ceasefire ultimatum to just 10 days, escalating from diplomacy to economic brinkmanship with threats of crushing secondary tariffs. As Putin faces mounting pressure, Russia intensifies drone assaults on Kiev and advances in Donbass, while Ukraine thwarts Kremlin-backed assassination plots. Amid cyber attacks crippling Aeroflot and Moscow pharmacies and the EU aligning with Washington on energy and trade, the world watches. Is this a final push for peace or high-stakes gambit destined to collapse under its own audacity? I'm Henny Saif, and this is Think Tank.
Our world is becoming unhinged.
Welcome back. The New York Times has reported that in a high-stakes diplomatic pivot, President Trump has abruptly shortened his ultimatum to Putin, demanding an end to the Ukraine war within 10 days or face crippling secondary sanctions, marking a sharp turn from engagement to coercion. Amid cyber attacks on Russian infrastructure and relentless drone warfare, Europe aligns with Washington through a sweeping trade deal, raising tariffs to 15% while pledging massive energy purchases, seeking stability without escalation. Yet as Moscow advances in Donbass and Kiev resists territorial concessions, Trump's deadline echoes with uncertainty. Is this a genuine push for peace or a gambit shaped by domestic pressures and shifting global power dynamics? According to The Guardian, President Trump has slashed his Ukraine peace ultimatum to just 10 days, signaling fierce economic pressure on Russia, prompting Zelensky to praise his clear stance and express determination as cyber attacks disrupt Aeroflot and drones strike deep into occupied territories. Meanwhile, relentless Russian barrages killed dozens, targeting prisons and civilians, while Ukraine hit back with AI-enhanced drones, blacking out Donetsk and striking symbolic sites, proving the war is no longer distant for many Russians. As Europe braces for fallout, Trump's deadline looms. A bid for peace or a high-stakes maneuver testing global patience, with millions watching whether diplomacy or disaster prevails. The Moscow Times has highlighted that diplomacy stalls as the Kremlin dismisses Trump's 10-day ultimatum, declaring U.S. talks going nowhere fast, while Washington ties resumed flights and embassy access to progress in Ukraine. Trump, expressing deep disappointment, accuses Putin of deceit, praising peace talks while bombarding cities, and threatens swift sanctions, signaling hardened leverage. Yet Moscow remains defiant, insisting the war continues regardless, exposing a chasm between rhetoric and reality, while diplomatic channels freeze as battle lines and cyber warfare escalate across Eastern Europe. And to examine the most recent updates concerning Russia-Ukraine war fate, we're joined from Kiev by Mr. Ivan Us, the advisor at Ukraine National Center, and from New York by Ms. Irina Tsukerman, the political researcher. Welcome to Think Tank. Mr. Us, is Ukraine's thwarted FSB assassination plot a sign of Russia shifting to covert warfare, and are your command structures still vulnerable?
Greetings to you, Hani, greetings to Rina, and greetings, of course, to all audience. You know, of course, now we are still in the waiting of steps from Donald Trump, as he yesterday changed the period of his ultimatum from 60 days till next 10 or 12 days, as Donald Trump said. Now, of course, we are thinking about the situation on the front line and vulnerability of actually our, first of all, command structures and actually our soldiers, how we are actually could exist at the next several weeks or so. So I think that on the one hand, we see that Russia made a every night attack on Ukrainian cities and sometimes every day, as yesterday happened at the evening at the Zaporozhye region when Russia attacked Ukrainian prison, murdered 17 people who what in this moment is this prison. So it's one more demonstration of the fact that Russia has only one plan to destroy everyone actually in Ukraine. But as for me, it's unfortunately a reality of war, and saying that Ukraine is not ready for it, for me it's hard. It's hard to prevent everything, but at least as for me, situation can be stable, and it is stable. But we will see what can happen in the next several weeks, because not only not only actually pressure from Donald Trump and his ultimatum, but so actually situation on the front line will demonstrate the future course of events. Thank you, Hani.
Yes. Ms. Zuckerman, how do you see Trump's 10-day deadline? Do you see it as a genuine escalation or just a political theater ahead of the NATO summit?
To Trump, it is not political theater. From Trump's perspective, it's more of a strategic pressure move calibrated for maximum media resonance and geopolitical disruption. The goal is not necessarily to trigger immediate concessions from Moscow, but to assert control over the narrative and force a recalibration of diplomatic positions on both sides of the Atlantic. So by collapsing the timeline, Trump is projecting urgency and command and positioning himself as the decisive actor, while implying that NATO, the EU, and even Zelensky are dragging their feet. He is actually trying to make himself look to be not only a major player, but the catalyst of pressure on Russia, despite and perhaps because of the optics suggesting otherwise up until this point. Trump has been receiving a lot of criticism for the original 50-day deadline, and so this move is will put him ahead of his critics. But there is another function to what he's saying, which is psychological dominance. By demonstrating unpredictability, Trump is putting his both the adversaries and allies on edge. If Putin believes Trump might flip from mediation to more serious punitive action within days, he's forced to either prepare for more intensified economic confrontation or scramble for diplomatic off-ramp. But this is less likely. Putin is not likely to suddenly change his mind because of threats. So he is going to be simply more desperate to find a move to get ahead of the deadline himself. On the other hand, the NATO members who hoped for a more methodical and predictable diplomatic track are under pressure to react to Trump's timetable rather than act on their own. And so the issue with paying for Ukraine's weapons and getting more engaged diplomatically is also on them. Mm-hmm. Now, Trump's records during his first term suggest a pattern of elastic deadlines, a lot of high-stake bluster and last-minute recalibrations. What we are seeing is actually nothing new. From North Korea to Iran to China, Trump has a history of threatening maximum pressure only to pivot when negotiations or domestic considerations demand it. The question is not whether Trump believes his own deadline, it's whether others believe he'll enforce it without an immediate payoff.
Well, away from deadlines, ultimatums, and political maneuvering to military warfare, Mr. Us, can the AI-guided drones and minefields realistically halt Russia's grinding advance towards Pokrovsk?
Hani, actually, AI drones played a really large role. So I couldn't say that only them can help to Russia to succeed in Pokrovsk, but just to remind that Russia made statements that Pokrovsk will be under their control approximately from the beginning of this year. Now we are situating in the end of July, end of the first months of the second half of the 2025, and Russia still not captured the city of Pokrovsk. So quite possible that they can succeed there just because of the constant attack on Pokrovsk. There is very hard to build any defense of the city. Nevertheless, as for Ukraine, of course, we not glad to lose any city, but on the other hand, if we are looking from strategic perspective, it does not influence on the course of war. So that's why now, of course, we understand that Russia had advantage in live forces, but a very important moment that we hear less about technique used by Russians. It means that capturing every city lost more and more people. And for Ukraine, the formula that we losing land but Russia losing more people, for us it's actually normal because we think that Russian could not be forever and Russian soldiers could not be forever. So as we decrease their quantity, we decrease the distance to our victory. Thank you, Hani.
Ms. Zuckerman, what about economic pressure and threats? Do you think that 100% secondary tariffs can truly cripple Russia, or will they mainly just punish Europe with higher energy prices?
Look, Europe is already on its way to off-ramp its energy from Russia, from dependence on Russia. In fact, this was kind of the point of the deal that Trump just concluded with the EU to substitute Russian fuels for American gas. Nevertheless, for the time being, some of that energy will, of course, become more costly because these countries do not have last-minute substitutes for the next 2 years. Of course, it's going to put pressure on the European Union, but the question is whether the European Union as economy can take it more than Russia's, and the answer is yes. Collectively, the European Union economy is much stronger than what Russia is facing. However, what we need to look at is not just energy. Russia is also engaged in trade with the United States itself on metals, and the same with the rest of the world, including Gulf states and African countries and many other countries around the world. So this would mean what Trump is trying to do is use tariffs as sanctions, but there is a significant difference. Trump cannot enforce tariffs on behalf of other countries. The only thing he can do is tariff the goods from the countries that are dealing with Russia. Alternatively, he can sanction, but that is not what he's talking about. So essentially, I'm not entirely sure that Trump is not simply using this energy to advance his own goal and simply impose higher taxes on goods from other countries. I'm not sure that it's going to have a serious punitive value, since he is already negotiating tariff deals and already raising tariff anyway, and that this will not put the United States primarily in a weaker position.
Yes.
The other countries that will be dealing with tariffs can go to other customers, including China, for instance, as the European Union is already doing. On the other hand, sanctions would force these countries into the uncomfortable position of having to make choices between the US and Russia. But again, this is not the policy that Trump is promoting. He's promoting taxes, not sanctions. and
Yes.
taxes ultimately hurt American consumers and also add to Trump's own tax revenue. So the fact that he's failing to make this important distinction is something that is yet to be addressed and properly understood.
Yes. Ms. Zuckerman and Mr. Us, please stay with us because now we will move to the second plenary session of the United Nations High-Level Ministerial Session on the peaceful settlement of the question of Palestine and the implementation of the two-state solution. Let's watch.
Operation and affirms the right of people to self-determination. From our liberation war in 71 to the recent mass uprising in July and August last year, the people of Bangladesh always pursued the right to self-determination. That legacy shapes our empathy and enduring solidarity with the Palestinian people in their legitimate aspirations for an independent, sovereign state. Co-chairs, we reaffirm our steadfast support for the establishment of a viable and independent state of Palestine, based on pre-1967 borders with East Jerusalem as its capital. We believe peace in the Middle East cannot be achieved without justice for Palestine, and justice cannot be delivered without implementing their two-state solution, the only viable and internationally recognized path forward, based on international law, relevant UN resolutions, and the aspirations of the people of Palestine. We strongly endorse the initiative of the Global Alliance for the implementation of the two-state solution. The consensus must now be translated into concrete, time-bound action. Excellencies, to turn this vision into reality, we must urgently address two core challenges. First, the conditions on the ground. A just and meaningful two-state solution requires a clear and contiguous Palestine territory. Today, that possibility is being disrupted through the expansion of illegal settlements in West Bank and the systematic erosion of Palestinian presence in East Jerusalem. Bangladesh calls for full compliance with international law in line with the advisory opinion of the International Court of Justice issued on 19 July 2024, ending Israel's unlawful presence in the occupied Palestinian territory. Second, flagrant violation of international humanitarian law unfolding since October 2023, which is unprecedented in scale and gravity. More than 58,000 Palestinians have lost their lives and many more have been injured, most of them women and children. Schools, hospitals, and aid camps are under attack by IDF, with countless bodies lying beneath rubble in Gaza. We are undoubtedly witnessing one of the gravest genocides.
Ladies and gentlemen, that was the Foreign Minister of Bangladesh live from New York's UN headquarters regarding the high-level ministerial meeting regarding the Palestinian cause and the implementation of the two-state solution. But now we resume our discussion with Ms. Zuckerman. Medvedev calls the US-European Union deal anti-Russian. Now, is Moscow now fully pivoting to China and North Korea as a survival strategy, maybe?
Thank you so much. Well, yeah, the answer is yes and no. It is true that Russia is increasingly dependent on its allies for survival, but none of that is news, and none of it is an issue of Europe, the United States, or anyone else simply looking to isolate Russia for its own sake. Had Russia decided to withdraw its forces from Ukraine, normal trade would resume instantaneously. The truth of the matter is China has been supplying Russia not with basic necessities, but with weapons and components Russia needs to continue the war, and North Korea has become an increasingly significant partner in that respect, with reportedly as high as 40% of Russia's equipment and weaponry ammunition coming from North Korea at this point. For North Korea, of course, this is an opportunity to make an international entry after decades of political and economic isolation. So yes, Russia is becoming more dependent. It's a testament to its economic weakness and to the success of the economic pressure by Western countries. But at the same time, this is by no means to mean that Russia has no other options. It always has the more option of coming to the table and agreeing agreeing to a peace deal, agreeing to withdraw its forces, agreeing to stop attacking civilians. Russia has opted not to do any of those things.
Yes. Well, Ukraine is now actually producing 71% of its weapons. Yet Zelensky also thanked Trump for the Patriot missiles, but refuses to cede territory. Is this strengthening Ukraine's hand or closing doors to negotiation?
I would say that negotiation is always on the table as long as Russia is acting in good faith, which it is not. Now, the Patriot missiles, admittedly, will not be coming to Ukraine until spring of next year. And that is a huge amount of time for Russia to do a lot of damage to civilians in Ukraine. Ukraine, however, is becoming more assertive, more successful, and using increasingly sophisticated methods to disrupt Russia's military offensive. So the question is also the balancing of how much humanitarian damage Russia wants to make versus its actual focus on achieving a military victory. And now it's very clear that Putin is stuck with few options. If he decides to withdraw from Ukraine, he is facing the appearance of defeat at home. If he continues the way he is doing, he will continue losing sooner or later as Ukraine is ramping up its domestic production. The biggest issue for him, of course, is how long he can keep up the war economy, which has given him some relief in terms of weapons production, but at the same time, he cannot go on indefinitely either. Now, if Trump really wanted to put pressure on Russia and get it to the table in the 10-day deadline that he promised, he would authorize the move of the Patriot missiles and other weapons to Ukraine immediately. But that's not what we're seeing. It's almost like Trump is contradicting himself and still looking for to give Putin a way out, even as he's trying to manage his own image and to look strong on the international stage before the NATO summit.
Mr. Us, we're glad we are reconnected again now. Cyber attacks have shut down Aeroflot and 900 Moscow pharmacies. Is this Ukraine's new asymmetric front, and can Russia retaliate in kind?
You know, Hani, first of all, formally, it's even not Ukrainian, it's Belarus hackers who made those problems to Russian Aeroflot, and it's demonstration of that fact that society in Belarus is not glad of the fact that Russia interfered in Belarus internal questions. First of all, that Russia supports the current regime of Lukashenko, the president of, or self-proclaimed president, as we called him in Ukraine, the Belarusian leader. So that's why it was attacked from them, but from those group of people. But of course, we understand that both in Ukraine and Belarus, we understand that we have the same problem, the name of this problem, Russia. And Russian people should understand that when your country starts a war, the people of this country will pay a price. So accountability of those people, I mean, Russian people, it's not a military people, it's civilians, but they are responsible for the decision of their government. So if you're killing people in the neighboring country, like Russia doing Ukraine for more than 3 years, probably it means that it's not only your government does it, it's you doing that as a taxpayers of the country, because your taxes goes to the killing of people. That's why this attack will be a normal thing as attack of some drones that are flying not far away from Russian airports that practically paralyzed the civil aviation in Russia. And you understand that Russia is the biggest, according to geography, country in the world. They need aviation because it's very hard to connect between different parts of this largest country in our world. Thank you, Hani.
Well, Mr. Roos, you did mention that Russia is targeting prison facilities and civilian homes. So is Ukraine facing deliberate campaign of terror? How can it defend a stretched front with dwindling air defenses?
So, of course, Ukraine said that, first of all, Russia started this war. That's why Russia is responsible both for everything that happened in Ukraine and in Russia, too. Unfortunately, we have no enough options to defend our, first of all, regions situated not far away from the front line, like Zaporizhia or Kherson, because half of Zaporizhia and half of Kherson region is occupied by Russia. That's why it's very hard to organize defense there. But now we are working on that. We thank to Donald Trump for Patriot system, but we understand that now the current war demonstrates the increasing role of the drones, as I mentioned before about AI drones. So and this artificial intelligence in drones make them extremely dangerous. That's why we need the same artificial intelligence drones that can destroy drones with the same system. So I think that the war of drones, it's one of the moments that the war of Russia versus Ukraine demonstrated. The drones start to play the enormous role. It's much cheaper than rockets, but it caused enormous damage. So now we will see how actually both Russia and Ukraine will organize the using of drones in the next weeks of war, because we understand that this war are hardly over, at least in this year. What will be in the next year, we will see. Thank you, Hani.
Ms. Zuckerman, the European Union agreed to a $750 billion in U.S. energy purchases. Is this economic unity or a coerced deal that shifts Europe's energy burden without breaking Russia's backbone?
To some extent, it's quite advantageous to Europe in the sense that Europe was had already, independently of Trump, committed to moving away from Russian gas by 2027. And that was their own deadline that they had agreed to internally. Now, they were looking for options. And of course, some of the options were preferable to others. Price is certainly one of the factors. The American energy is not going to be cheap, but neither will anything coming from, say, Qatar. Russia would have been the cheapest option regardless. So once you take the cost of the table, U.S. has proven to be a reliable partner. It's given that some of this will not be implemented till Trump is already out of office. We may presume that that U.S.-European relations could stabilize by that point. And in the meantime, this actually brings EU and U.S. Closer on the same page. This is exactly the type of cooperation that helps the countries strengthen their economic relations. Now, of course, let's not forget that this deal was also linked to other parts of the deal that included the raising of tariffs on European goods to the United States, making them less affordable for American consumers. So that of course is going to offset the advantages of that. But would I say that portion of the deal is cursed? I would not say that at all. I think this is the kind of deal that the countries would have been trying to negotiate regardless.
Mr. Oos, one final question, real quick. Now, Trump demands peace in 10 days, yet refuses to cede territory. Does Kiev see this deadline as leverage or a dangerous shortcut that rewards aggression?
You know, Hani, I think it's leverage on China and India to actually decrease the dependence on Russia. India said that, yes, we will not buying Russian oil. China say no. That's why quite possible that after the deal between European Union and the United States, quite possible that the steps after those 12 days by Donald Trump on increasing tariffs on China will receive the main approach from Europe. So it will be not only a US approach, it will be Europe approach that will influence on the Russian partners not to pay money to Russia, and that can seriously damage its economy. Thank you, Hani.
Thank you very much, sir. Ladies and gentlemen, that was Mr. Ivan Oos, the advisor at Ukraine National Center, and Ms. Irina Zuckerman, the political researcher. Thank you both for your insight and this valuable discussion. 10 days to peace or peril? As diplomacy, cyber war and deadline collide, the world holds its breath. The clock is ticking, and that brings us to the end of today's episode of Think Tank. I'm Henny Saif. Thank you for joining us.